Hi, I'm David BRETHERTON and this is where it all started.
Hi, and I'm Alan Hickman. Many years ago in the 1980s we used to use the Rising Sun as our local, and one evening the landlord, John Patience at the time, actually claimed that it was the oldest pub and the oldest building in Thame.
He was wrong on both counts, and 12 years later, after many years of research, we published our book Thame Inns Discovered in the year 2000.
Well, that book has now been out of print for many years, hasn't it, Dave?
Yep, it has.
And after many requests we've decided that we are going to make an update.
We missed some things out and got some things wrong in this first book. Well, nobody's perfect. We know that all the internet is expanding, and so lots of information has become more readily available. This has meant we've been able to correct some of the errors and actually add some more pieces to the book.
Many people suggested we cover some of the villages, so we decided to do that. Although we've only limited it to Moreton, Towersey and Kingsey. Larger villages such as Chinner, Tetsworth and Luncrendon would almost warrant books themselves. We'll tell you about some of our recent research. But before we leave the Rising Sun, there are a few old pubs you should also know about. The One Bell is across the road from the Rising Sun, and next door to the Rising Sun itself is the Arnott's Beer House. And across Southern Road was once the Phoenix Brewery. Further down the road are Thame's newest pub, the Thatch, and also the Six Bells, which at one time claimed to be the last inn out. But of course, further down the road in the 19th century was the Crown and also the Plough.
In the newspaper archives that are now available online, we found in Jackson's Oxford Journal for 1781 an advertisement for cockfighting at the Oxford Arms. Unfortunately, it doesn't say who is running the inn, but it does tell us that the Oxford Arms was thriving in 1781 when we actually thought it had closed. We then found that the Oxford Arms is in fact an earlier name for the Spread Eagle. So we've changed the article in the book on the Spread Eagle to say that it was built in the early 18th century, certainly before 1709, but built as a private house by the Stone family. But by 1728 it had become the Oxford Arms. And then sometime after 1781, after the cockfighting article, it became a private house again. This was where local solicitor John Hollier lived and where he had his office. In 1837, the building was bought by Charles Simmons and he opened it as the Spread Eagle Hotel.
What else is of interest around here?
Well, we're still outside the birdcage and you can't ignore that, but its story is pretty well known and fully covered in the book. But in the Oxford Record Office back in 1998, if you remember, we found a property deed from the 1600s that gave details of the inns in this area and surprised us by putting the Greyhound on the south side of the high street. The document talks about the Red Lion. That's actually Lightfoot's now. The document says that was next door to the Fighting Cocks. That's Sainsbury's. And then came the Windmill, followed by the Greyhound. And to add to that, the Windmill was formerly called the Cock, and there was a Black Horse there too. Our conclusion is that the Greyhound was where the James Fig is now.
But there's too many buildings.
Yeah, I know, it's difficult, isn't it? You need to look at the roof lines. You can see that Sainsbury's is two properties actually, and that's the Fighting Cocks and the Windmill. And what we see as Robert Stanley's now was part of the original Greyhound. So that was one building. So we've actually only got 4 buildings there. So in those days, the Greyhound occupied the whole of that building.
Yeah, in recent memory, James Fig, of course, was the Wenman Arms, but only that name dates back to about 1830. James Fig himself was an 18th century broadstaff and bare knuckle boxing champion. Born in Thame, and he made the Greyhound his headquarters. And when the current owners were looking for a change of the name from Abingdon Arms, we suggested they called it the James Fig, which of course they did.
Cheers. Okay, we're now stood at the corner of North Street, next to the Market House. In our first book we said this was once the Chequer Alehouse. Well, that was partly right, but now we know the old alehouse on this site was demolished in 1788 to make way for that building, and presumably they took down the old blacksmith's forge at the same time. The building we see now was originally opened as an independent chapel. Also on this spot we can see across the road the Black Horse, the White Horse and the Nag's Head. Nag's Head is one of the oldest pubs in Thame, although of course it was originally called the King's Head and its name was changed during the Civil War, but that's covered in the book. Just down the road you can see the iron stanchion where the sign of the Fox once hung. and just past that was the Angel and the Angel and Crown.
Well, we're now standing outside the Cross Keys. It's a great example of a well-run pub, rising from the ashes, unlike many of those that did close during the 20th century. And it's now our local. We'll be launching our book here sometime in the late October. Of course, that will depend when we get it back from the printers.
Yeah, well, that depends on when we put it in, doesn't it, as well? Moved on. That's the Four Horseshoes, which closed in 1998. I think this is a good example of the insatiable developers. Nothing wrong with the running of the pub. The developers saw an opportunity to convert it to housing, and the brewery then, of course, could not resist the offer. Let's just hope that no more fall this way.
On the way down to the Four Horseshoes, down Park Street, we passed the Red Lion and the Woolpack, both of which closed over 100 years ago. And of course we've also got the Wenman Arms over the road, that closed in 1964. There's other beer houses here as well. There's the King of Prussia, the Bricklayers Arms in the 19th century. Unfortunately, we don't know the exact location.
Round the corner, of course, is the Falcon. It's the sole survivor in this area of town, and I suppose it owes its existence to the coming of the railway. It was actually once known as the Falcon Railway Hotel, but our book talks about it being best known as a pub which have had most brewery owners than any other pub in Thame, and it now serves Hook Norton beer.
Yeah, obviously there's been many other pubs, inns, beer houses in Thame. Call them whatever you want. Sadly, most are no more, but we've just given you in the book a snippet of some of them. The book hopefully covers most of them, over 60 at the last count, including 6 in the local villages. Although we have to say they didn't all exist at the same time. That's not a cue for a pint. I don't know what is.
We'll be launching our book soon, and we'll have book signings in many of the pubs over the next month or so, leading up to Christmas. The books will be available at book clubs and many of the local pubs. Cheers.
Cheers.